I have told this story exactly twice in the 11 years since it happened, and both times I have started in the wrong place, so let me try to start it right. It was a bright day. That is the first thing I want you to understand, because everything that came after was so dark with smoke that people forget the morning was clean and ordinary and full of light. The sky over Whitmore Palace was the kind of blue you only get in Bryn Mawr in late spring, washed and high, with the gulls wheeling in off the river the way they always did, and the white stone of the stone court throwing the sun back so hard that half the crowd stood squinting under their hands. I had a box of ceremonial programs under my arm. That was my business there. I ran a small print shop in Hallowford, 2 days coach north, and the palace household had ordered 400 folded programs for the season of state ceremonies, and I had brought the first run down myself to be sure of the gilt edging, because I am the kind of man who does not trust a thing he has not seen with his own eyes. My wife says it is my worst quality. I have come, over the years, to think it may be my only good one. So I was there at the rail with my box, an ordinary tradesman among a few hundred tourists and locals, waiting for noon and the changing of the guard, because I had an hour to fill, and a man does not stand in the stone court at noon and not watch. If you have never seen it, I will try to give it to you. The forecourt is a great paved square of pale stone before the palace's main face, fenced from the public by a low gilded railing, and at the heart of it stand the sentry posts of the Bryn Mawr Royal Foot Guards. They are the men in the red wool tunics and the tall black bearskin caps, white gloves, brass buttons taking the light, a rifle held just so, chin straps cutting a hard line under the jaw. You have all seen the photographs. What the photographs do not give you is the stillness. A photograph is already still, so it cannot show you a man being still on purpose, holding himself out of the moving world by an act of will, hour after hour, while the world goes by an arm's length from his face. The tourists test it. They always do. They lean in, they make faces, they call out, they wave their hands before his eyes, they have their friends stand beside him grinning for a picture, and the man does not blink. He looks through them and past them at something none of us can see. I had watched it 100 times on visits, and it had always struck me as a slightly cold thing, a little inhuman, a man turned into a statue of himself for the amusement of strangers. I want to be honest about that because of what I learned that day. I had thought it was coldness. I had thought wrong. The man at the near post, the one closest to where I stood, was younger than I expected. You could tell by the line of his throat above the chin strap, the smoothness of it. He was not a big man. There is a notion people have that those guards are all giants, and some are, but this one was only ordinary in his size, and it was the bear skin and the bearing that made him tall. He had gray eyes. I remember the gray eyes because at one point a child wandered up to the railing near him, a little boy in a red coat, holding a paper windmill on a stick, separated by a few feet of stone from the guard's post, and the boy held the windmill up and blew on it, and it spun, and the guard's eyes flicked down to it. Just for an instant. The smallest break in all that stillness, a flicker there and gone, and his eyes went forward again, and his face never changed at all. But I saw it. I think I was the only one who saw it. And I remember thinking, almost without meaning to, there's a man behind that face after all, and then I forgot it, because the noon bell began. The bell of Whitmore is an old deep bell, and when it strikes the hour the pigeons go up off the whole front of the palace in one gray sheet, and the crowd always laughs at that, the great soft thunder of all those wings, and the relief column of the guard comes round from the western arch in slow march, and the drum keeps them, and it is one of the genuinely beautiful things a man can stand and watch for free in this world. The bell struck. The pigeons went up. The crowd laughed and lifted their phones. The little boy in the red coat blew on his windmill. The relief column came round the arch with the drum keeping them, red and black and white in the high clean light. And then the world came apart. I have tried for 11 years to find a better word for the sound, and I have not. People who were not there ask me what it was like, and they want me to say it was like thunder, or like a cannon, and it was not like either of those things, because thunder and cannon are sounds that arrive and pass, and this was a sound that arrived and then kept being there. A great flat slap of pressure that I felt in my chest and my back teeth before I heard it with my ears, and it came from across the square, from the old exchange building on the far side where they had the scaffolding up for the stonework. And where, we learned afterward, a gas main under the street had been leaking into the cellars for 3 days, while men in offices argued about whose business it was to dig. The first blast took out the lower windows of the exchange in a single white cough of glass and a fist of gray smoke, and the ground jumped under all of us, and the box of programs went out of my arms, and 400 folded sheets with gilt edges went up into the bright air like a flock of square white birds and came down all over the stone court, and I never saw a single one of them again. I want to be careful here, because what happened next has been told badly so many times, with so much shouting in it, and the truth is quieter and worse than the shouting. For about 2 seconds nobody moved. That is a real thing that happens. The whole crowd, several hundred people, simply stood, every face turned the same way toward the smoke, and there was a silence that was not really silence but the absence of anyone having decided yet what to do. Then somebody screamed, and that was the key turning in the lock, and the crowd became a different thing entirely. It stopped being a crowd. A crowd is people who are all looking at the same thing. What we became was people all trying to be somewhere else, and a low gilded railing and a few narrow exits between us and that wish. And that is the most dangerous thing in the world, more dangerous than the smoke, more dangerous than the fire that was beginning to show orange in the lower exchange. People went over the railing. People went down and were stepped on. I was carried 6 or 8 feet sideways by the press of bodies before I got my back to a stone bollard and held there with both hands, and I am not a small man, and I could do nothing but hold. And it was from there, with my back to the bollard and my arms braced and the crowd grinding past me, that I saw the rest of it. So I am one of the few who saw the whole of it, because I was the one who could not move. The boy in the red coat had been near the railing when the blast came. His grandmother, I learned later she was his grandmother, a Mrs. Aldous of the River Quarter, who had brought him up to the city for his birthday. His grandmother had hold of his hand, and when the crowd turned and ran, she was taken off her feet and carried back, and his small hand was pulled out of hers, and she went one way in the river of people, and he went the other down against the railing, and then through it, onto the open stone of the forecourt where no member of the public is ever allowed to set foot. He fetched up against the base of a sentry post, the very post nearest me, the post of the young guard with the gray eyes. And between the boy and the rest of the square, between him and the way out, the second thing happened. The scaffolding came down, not all of it. A section of the renovation works on the stone court's eastern wall. They were releading a length of the old balustrade. A section of that scaffold, shaken loose by the blast, and then by the surge of the crowd against its base, leaned and groaned. A long iron groan I will hear on my deathbed, and came over, planks and poles and a slither of cut stone, down across the open corner of the forecourt, throwing up a wall of pale dust, and it came down between the boy and the gate. And it pinned the hem of his red coat, and a pole lay across his small legs, not crushing. I want to be clear, not crushing him, but holding him. And the dust rolled over him and he was coughing, and I could see his face turn up white and open-mouthed in the dust, and the first drift of real smoke now coming across from the exchange. And he was perhaps a stone's throw from me, and there was nothing on this earth I could do to reach him. Because the crowd was a wall, and the railing was a wall, and I am only a printer. So I looked at the one man who was close enough. I want you to understand the rules, because the rules are the whole of it. A sentry of the Brenmark Royal Foot Guards on ceremonial duty does not leave his post. That is not a guideline. It is the spine of the entire thing, drilled into him until it is below thought, below choice, a reflex made of years. He does not leave his post for rain or for insult or for a tourist's hand in his face or for a fainting woman in the crowd. There are other men for the crowd. There are the police, the stewards, the relief column, the officers. There is a whole apparatus whose business is the crowd, and there is one man whose single sacred business is to stand at that post and be the still point, and the entire meaning of him is that he does not move. I knew that, the way everyone knows it, and I looked at the young guard with the gray eyes, standing at his post 6 feet from a child pinned in the smoke, and I knew with a sick certainty that he was not going to be allowed to be the one. That it was not his to do, that the rules had him. He had not moved. The whole square had come apart and the man had not so much as flinched, and for one instant I hated it. I hated the stillness with my whole heart. I thought, you cold thing, you statue. There is a child, and I was wrong. I was wrong about him the same way I had been wrong about him all morning, and I am ashamed of that instant to this day. Because he was not frozen, he was deciding. I saw it happen. I was close enough and I was held still enough and I was looking right at him, and I saw the exact moment a man chose to throw away the thing his whole life had been built into. His gray eyes came down from the middle distance where they always lived. They came down and they found the boy. And his face, that face that had not changed for a windmill or a blast or a falling sky, his face changed. It is the only time I have ever watched a man's whole self come back up into his face all at once. And he turned his head, which a sentry does not do, and he looked once, very fast, toward the western arch where his officers would be. And there was no officer there. There was only smoke and the running crowd, and I understood that he had looked for someone to give him leave and had found no one, and that he was going to do it anyway without leave, knowing what it would cost. He brought his rifle up and across and set it down. He did not drop it, even then, even in that, he did not drop it. He set the rifle down against the post the way you would lay down something you had sworn to keep, and I think of that small carefulness more often than I think of anything else from that day. And then Lance Corporal Ewan Hale of the Brenmark Royal Foot Guards left his post. He did not run the way the crowd ran. That is the thing. The crowd ran like water finding the low ground, blind, all of it the same way. He moved against it, into it, the only red figure in all that pale dust going the wrong way, toward the smoke, and he moved like a man walking into a hard sea, low, shoulder down, one gloved hand out to turn the bodies that came at him, and it cost him. I saw him knocked half off his feet twice. I saw a man's elbow take him across the side of the head, and the tall bearskin cap go off him and roll away into the dust, and nobody, including Hale, gave it a second's thought. And without the cap, he was suddenly just a young man with cropped hair and a frightened, fixed, absolutely determined face, wadding through a stampede toward a pinned child, and he was beautiful. And I am not a man who uses that word about other men, but there is no other word and I will not pretend there is. He reached the boy. He went down on his knees in the dust and the spreading smoke and got his shoulder under the fallen scaffold pole that lay across the small legs, and he lifted it. I do not know where the strength came from. It was a long iron pole with stone on it, and he was not a big man. He lifted it enough, with his back and his legs and a sound I could hear even over everything, enough to drag the boy clear with his other arm. And the boy was screaming now, fully screaming, the way a small child screams when the world has betrayed every promise it ever made him. And Hale did a thing that I have turned over in my mind 1,000 times. With the smoke rolling over both of them and the fire showing brighter across the square and his own post abandoned and his cap gone and his whole career, as he must have known, gone with it, he stopped. For 1 second he stopped and he put his bare, ungloved hand. He had stripped the white glove off. I never saw when he put his hand against the side of the boy's face, and he said something to him. I was too far to hear it. I have always been glad I was too far to hear it because it was not mine to hear. Whatever he said, the boy stopped screaming. Not because the danger was gone. The danger was not gone. The boy stopped screaming because a calm thing had arrived in the middle of the breaking world and told him, in a voice meant only for him, that it was going to be all right, and the boy believed it, the way you believe a thing told to you like that, and he put his arms around the guard's neck. And then Hale stood up with the boy held against his chest, one big careful hand cupped over the back of the small head to keep it down out of the smoke, and turned in against his own shoulder so the child would not see the fire, and he carried him out. He did not go to the nearest gate. The nearest gate was a crush, a killing crush, people stacked at it. He turned and carried the boy along the front of the palace, in under the eaves where the smoke was thinner, the long way, the safe way, the way a man works out in half a second when the fast way will get a child killed. And he came along under the wall toward where I stood braced at my bollard, close enough now that I could see the boy's red coat against the red tunic, two reds, and the guard's face streaked gray and his jaw set. And as he passed me, he did not look at me. He was looking only ahead. At the clear ground past the broken railing where the stewards were finally getting hold of things, and he carried that child out of the stone court and put him into the arms of a steward in a yellow coat. And only then, only when the small weight was safely transferred, did he turn around and go back. That is the part I have to make people believe, and it is the part they least want to believe because it is the part that asks the most of them. He went back. He had done the thing. He had saved the child and abandoned his post and ended his career and earned, by any law of the body and the heart, the right to sit down in the clean air and shake. And he turned around and walked back into the smoke because he had seen something else on his way out, something I had not seen, and that was the old man. There was an old veteran in the forecourt that day. His name, I learned, was Major Corwin Bray, and he was 90 or near it, and he had been brought to the stone court that morning in his wheeled chair by his daughter to see the changing of the guard one more time, because he had stood that very post himself 60 years before, a young man in the same red wool, and his daughter had thought it would be a kindness. When the crowd turned, his daughter had been torn from the handles of his chair, the same way the boy was torn from his grandmother, and the old man had been left sitting in his wheeled chair in the middle of the open forecourt, alone, unable to rise, the smoke coming toward him, and he had done, they told me this afterward, and I believe it absolutely. He had done the only thing a man of that regiment knows how to do when he cannot run and cannot fight and cannot save himself. He had straightened the line of his old medals on his chest with one shaking hand, and he had sat up as straight as 90 years would let him, and he had waited. He was not going to be found slumped. Whatever was coming, it was going to find a guardsman of Brenmark sitting at attention. And Ewan Hale, 24 years old, came back through the smoke and got behind that chair and put his head down by the old man's head and said something, and the old man laughed. There were people near enough to hear it, and they all say the same thing, that the old man laughed, a short bark of a laugh in the middle of the fire, and Hale took the handles of the wheeled chair and ran it out of the stone court over the broken paving, jolting and fast, one wheel screaming. The old man holding to the arms of the chair with his medals catching the strange orange light, and he brought him out too. He brought them both out, the child and the old soldier, the two ends of a life, the smallest and the oldest, the two who could not run. He went back for the ones who could not run, which is, when you boil down everything that regiment has ever stood for into one sentence, the whole of it, the entire meaning of the red coat, and a 24-year-old lance corporal understood it that day better in 90 seconds than I have understood anything in my life. The fire was put out. The exchange was a ruin, but it was an empty ruin. The second blast people feared never came. The gas was shut off at the main within the hour by a crew who I hope were decorated and probably were not. There were injuries in the crush, some of them bad, none of them, by a mercy nobody deserved, fatal. The boy in the red coat was returned to his grandmother, who had been carried clear and was out of her mind with terror until a steward put the child back in her arms, and the two of them sat on the cobbles in the clear air and rocked, and the boy still had, somehow, gripped in his fist the whole time, the paper windmill on the stick. I saw it spinning slowly in his hand while his grandmother held him. The old major was reunited with his daughter and gave, I am told, a great deal of trouble about being checked over by the physicians, on the grounds that he had been under heavier fire than this and not made such a fuss. And Lance Corporal Ewan Hale stood at the edge of the cleared ground with no cap and one glove, and a long burned streak of soot down the side of his face, and he was placed under arrest by his own regiment. And that is where most people, when I tell this, want me to stop, because it makes them angry, and I do not blame them, but it is not where the story stops, so I will go on. You must understand it from inside the regiment, even if you cannot like it. A sentry left his post. There is no exception written anywhere that says unless there is a good reason, because the entire value of the thing is that there is never a reason good enough, because the moment there is one reason there are 1,000, and the still point stops being still, and the post stops meaning anything. The young officer who had to do it, a lieutenant not much older than Hale himself, did it with his cap in his hand and could barely get the words out, and Hale stood at attention through all of it, soot and all, and said, when the lieutenant had finished, only, "Yes, sir. I understand, sir." He did not argue. He did not plead the child. He had broken the most sacred rule of his service, and he stood there and accepted that it was broken and that something must follow. And I think that is the most disciplined thing he did all day, more disciplined than the stillness, more disciplined even than going back for the old man. He had thrown the rule away to save a life, and he would not now pretend the rule had not been a rule. He took the cost with the same straight back the old major had shown the fire. They are made of the same thing, that regiment. I had not understood that in the morning. I understood it by the afternoon. They took him in. And for 2 days the kingdom of Brenmark talked of nothing else, because of course the phones had been out the whole time, mine among them. I had got it up in my one free hand at some point without even deciding to, and there is a stretch of shaky footage from that day, taken by a printer braced against a stone bollard, that shows a red figure wadding the wrong way through a running crowd, and it has been seen more times than I can think about without a strange feeling. And the country saw what I saw. And the country did not care about the rule. The country cared about the boy and the windmill and the old soldier laughing in the fire. And there was a great noise made, petitions and speeches and the newspapers, all of it demanding that the young man be freed and praised, and I confess I added my own small voice to it. But here is the thing I have come to feel in 11 years, and it is the reason I tell the story at all. The noise was not what saved him. The noise would have freed him, perhaps, the way a loud enough crowd frees anyone. But it would not have honored him, and there is all the difference in the world. What honored him came from inside the thing he had broken, and it came quietly, the way everything that matters in that regiment comes. On the 3rd day the king held a review in the stone court. The square had been swept and the broken railing repaired and the scorched stone of the eastern wall left exactly as it was, on the king's own order, unrepaired, as a thing to be remembered rather than hidden. I was there. I had not gone home. I could not have told you why, except that I felt I had not finished being there. The whole regiment was drawn up, red and black, the still line of them, and the crowd was the largest I have ever stood in, silent, the kind of silence a crowd only makes when it knows it is at the edge of something. And they brought out Lance Corporal Hale, in a clean tunic, capless, between 2 other guardsmen, and for one terrible moment I thought, along with everyone else, that we had come to see him broken in front of us, drummed out, his buttons cut, and the crowd made a low sound of grief, and I have never wanted to be wrong about anything so much in my life. The king came down the line and stopped in front of him. The king was an old man himself by then, and he stood a long moment looking at this young lance corporal who had thrown away the unthrowable rule, and the whole square held its breath, and then the king did the thing that I will carry to my grave. The king of Brenmark, before his own regiment and his own people and the whole watching country, the king took off his own hat, and he inclined his head to the young man, and in the great silence of the stone court his old voice carried, and he said, "Corporal Hale, you left your post." "Yes, your majesty," said Hale, "I did." "Tell me why." And the young man was quiet for a moment, and then he said, and I was close enough this time, I was close enough to hear every word, and I have never forgotten one of them, he said, "because the post was never the stone, sir. The post was always the people. I have stood that post 3 years and never once moved, and I thought all that while I was guarding the palace. I was wrong. I was guarding them. And when the day came that standing still would have failed them, then standing still was the only way I could fail my post. So I left the stone, sir, to keep the post. I am sorry it had to be one or the other. I would do it again. The king put his hat back on, and then he did not free Lance Corporal Hale exactly. He did something better and stranger. He turned to the colonel of the regiment and he said, loud enough for all of us, "The rule stands. A sentry does not leave his post. Let no man here mistake what we do today. The rule stands because the kingdom needs men who will not move." And the crowd's heart sank, mine with it. And then the old king said, "But the rule was made by men for the keeping of other men. And on the day the two came apart, this man kept the deeper thing and broke the lesser and chose rightly and took his punishment like a guardsman without one word of excuse. The rule we keep. Him we honor. Both. For the rule is what makes the red coat worth the wearing, and he is what the red coat is for." And the king pinned a thing on Ewan Hale's chest, some honor of the realm whose name I never properly caught and have never bothered to learn, because it is not the name that matters, and the regiment, the whole still red line of them, the men whose entire pride is that they do not move, the regiment broke. Every one of them. At an order I did not hear given, the whole line came to the present arms, the salute, the highest thing they have, 400 rifles flashing up as one in the clean swept light, 400 motionless men moving at last all together, for one of their own who had moved when it counted. And the old Major Corwin Bray, 90 years old, was there in his wheeled chair at the front with his medals straight, and he could not stand, but he got his old hand up, shaking, in the salute he had first learned 60 years before on that same stone, and he held it there, trembling the whole length of the honors, with the tears running down into the deep lines of his face. And beside him a small boy in a red coat sat on his grandmother's lap and watched the man who had carried him out of the smoke. And the boy did not understand any of it, and waved his paper windmill and it spun. I went home to Hallowford the next day. I never replaced the 400 programs. The household quietly forgave the debt and never sent for them again, and I never asked why. I have printed many thousands of things since, weddings and notices and the small business of a small town, and it is good work and I am glad of it. But I have never again printed anything that mattered as much as those 400 folded sheets that I dropped in the stone court, because they are the reason I had no box in my arms and both hands free, one to brace and one, without my ever deciding it, to lift a phone, so that the country could see what I saw. People ask me when I tell this whether I ever met him. I did once, years later, a gray-eyed man at a regimental remembrance, no longer young, with a steady wife, and I noticed a small son of his own who held his hand. I did not tell him I was the printer. I shook his hand and said only that I had been in the stone court that day, and he looked at me for a moment with those gray eyes and said, "A great many people were," kindly, in a way that closed the door, and I let it close, because a man like that does not want to be thanked. He wants to be left to be ordinary, and the leaving of him alone was the only thing of value I had to give him. But I will tell you the thing I have never told him, the thing this whole story has been walking toward. I told you at the start that I had thought the stillness was a cold thing, a man turned to stone for the amusement of strangers, and that I had thought wrong. Here is what I learned. The stillness was never the opposite of moving. The stillness was the holding back of a man who could move, who wanted to move, who flinched inside at the windmill and the child and the falling sky, and who held and held and held, not because he felt nothing but because he had given his word to feel it and not act on it, until the one moment the holding would have been the betrayal, and then he spent it all at once. The discipline was never the absence of the heart. The discipline was a man standing guard over his own heart, year on year, keeping it ready, keeping it whole, so that on the one day it was needed there would be all of it, undiminished, to give. I had it exactly backwards in the bright morning. The still men are not the cold ones. The still men are the ones with the most to hold. That is why he could not move for any of the small things. He was saving it for the boy.